Hi, everyone. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm AJ Mendez, a proud board member of the Friends of the Semel Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our first Open Mind of the Fall 2021, Spring 2022 season. For our first-time viewers, the Friends, together with the Resnick Hospital Board of Advisors, sponsor the Open Mind lecture and film series that brings together thought leaders in science and culture for relevant and informative discussions about mental health issues that affect us all. We're excited to welcome our esteemed panel of educators and students for today's Back to School Anxiety program. We are honored to have Dr. John Piacentini as our moderator. He is a professor in the UCLA Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences and director of the UCLA Child Anxiety Resilience Education and Support Center. He will be joined by Dr. Sybil Catalan, head of school UCLA Geffen Academy, who will also speak as a parent of a high school sophomore, a college sophomore, and a college senior. Also joining us is Ross Szabo, Director of Wellness at the Geffen Academy and renowned author of A Kid's Book About Anxiety and Behind Happy Faces, Taking Charge of Your Mental Health. We also have Zach Gottlieb, a high school junior and creator of the Instagram @TalkWithZach, and Lucia Cleveland, a high school senior who is co-leader of her school's Black Student Union, a founding member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and captain of the basketball team. You're both way cooler than I ever was in high school. A huge thank you to all of our participants for joining us and giving us their time today. We hope this program will give you some important takeaways to manage the stress and worries of returning back to class and help make the transition to a successful start of the school year. Following the discussion, we'll have some time for audience questions. So if you'd like to ask any of our panelists a question, type it into the Q&A located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. We also want to let you know that today's program is being taped and will be available for viewing tomorrow on our website, friendsofthesemelinstitute.org. There you'll find videos of past Open Mind programs, a calendar of upcoming events, and info on our Friends Scholar program. And now, please welcome our Back to School Anxiety panelists.
Thank you, AJ, for the introductions. It really is a really cool panel, and I'm very excited to ask some questions and start a discussion and learn more about how kids are doing and the tips and strategies that they have for going back to school. And we have a really great, with the head of school and a head of well-being and some students. I think it's going to be a really great experience here, and hopefully we're going to learn a lot. So Ross, I'd like to start with you first. There's been a lot of pretty intense media about youth mental health and back to school anxiety the past few months. It's been all over TV, all over everywhere. And there are a lot of nervous parents and probably some nervous children as well that are pretty anxious about this transition. So what can you tell parents and others who are watching tonight about how to make sense of all this information?
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, and it's really great to be here to have this conversation. I think the most important thing to start with is identifying the differences between feeling nervous and actually having an anxiety disorder. We're not having a strong conversation about mental health literacy right now. And one thing we do at our school, one thing I've done in my book is really try to help people understand that nervousness is a feeling we all have. The butterflies we get in our stomach before we're about to do something we haven't done, or before we're about to go into school or start a year or do something new are normal. That nervousness lasts a short amount of time and it goes away. So you can tell someone who's nervous to calm down. But we also know that 10 to 15% of kids have an anxiety disorder or issues with an anxiety disorder. And an anxiety disorder is not nervousness. It's not butterflies in your stomach. It's a physical feeling that can result in a panic attack where it feels like the walls are caving in. You might be having a heart attack. You physically feel like you're going to die. You're uncomfortable in your own skin. That is nervousness times kind of 900 million that builds and builds and builds to a point where someone does start to not be able to see reality. So you can tell someone who's nervous to calm down. Someone who has an anxiety disorder actually needs to be able to see what's real again. So once you've determined where your student or your child is on that spectrum, or where you are on that spectrum as a parent, as you send your kid back to school, then there are different things you can do. If it's just nervousness, then again, as you get used to the schedule, as you get used to going back to school, that will probably fade in a few days or weeks, depending on who you are. If it's actual anxiety disorder, it's much deeper, and it's important to work with a student, to work with a family, to start bringing in things that can help ground a person, whether that's breathing techniques, focusing on one part of a desk as a technique. There are other skills that people can use at resources in their schools or outside therapy, but it's often best if a parent is really attuned with that work and helping a student do it as they are adjusting back to school.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because people do tend to confuse kind of expected anxiety and nervousness with a mental illness or something that's much more problematic, and they're very different approaches. So I really like that. Are there other things that you can talk about right now that parents and caretakers can do to support their children? I mean, differentiating, is it real anxiety versus is it kind of expected anxiety is one thing. What other types of tips or strategies might you have?
Sure. I think that the other important thing is really understanding that this is going to be a transition for everyone. For all of our students, we came back for a hybrid model last year for about 2 months, 3 months before we left. A lot of schools are going back for the first time. And so give space during that. Try not to swing the needle too far to overreacting or kind of underreacting. Let your kid come home from school and talk about what it's like, because people are going to be all over the spectrum. Some students are not going to have trouble adjusting, and they should have space to be supported and be okay. Some students might have some concerns where like something happened and they're like, oh my gosh, like this was so weird, and give space to that. And then other students are clearly going to be having a difficult time, and just giving space for them to name it and not rushing or trying to fix it. The reality is we are creatures of habit. We do need systems. We do need patterns, but we also have to give space for that to happen. And when you can identify where your child is on that spectrum, you can better support them. So one of the best ways to kind of open up that communication as an adult is also to share your own experiences. So if you're going back to in-person things for the first time, just sharing like, hey, I noticed that this was happening to me, and normalizing that conversation around mental health so that it's not a, do you have a problem conversation? It's an actual conversation about what people are experiencing and you're a part of it, versus just checking in on a young person to see if they have a problem. Anything you can do in a family to normalize mental health always leads to more productive conversations.
That's great, thanks. So Lucia, you just started back to school this week, right?
Yeah, I did.
How's it been going?
It's been way more fun than I predicted. It's also been very exhausting. So yeah, it's been a healthy balance of both, I feel like.
Yeah, I've heard that from some of the other kids that I work with, and they're really nervous, and they go back and they say everybody was feeling the same kind of nervousness, and it made everybody feel better because you were all in the same boat together. That's great. So have there been any strategies that you found helpful for managing these first few day backs? I mean, whether it's normal stress and anxiety or other kind of more problematic anxiety that maybe you're seeing in friends?
I feel like, I don't know, kind of what I just said about like, it's not exactly how I predicted. And so for me, I've been trying to focus on the things that I can control. That's like my focus this year. I've just been focusing on like checking in with my friends and like talking to teachers. I feel like that's been really amazing. Just like getting to say hi. I haven't seen everybody in a really long time in person. And I also really been focusing on like balance. Like I want to be able to have a healthy balance between like my social life and like also, of course, my academics. I'm a senior, so that means that there's college applications, which provides another layer of anxiety for sure. But I'm just trying to focus kind of like on organization. I've been like diligent about my to-do lists and like my planners. That helps me feel grounded. And it's been really important for me to check in with people that I know support me and I support them.
Yeah, that sounds really, really great. And Zach, how's the return to school been for you?
Yeah, so I actually start on Monday, and
Mm.
I know it'll be a period of adjustment. So I really want to make sure not to overschedule myself and really leave time for downtime because that is really important for my mental health. And I'm also going to pay attention to my feelings and talk about them because for all of us, when we don't talk about our feelings, we end up feeling more alone. And I also want to practice everything we normally do for our mental health, like getting enough sleep and eating healthy meals, and getting exercise. And we really need to make sure that we're doing this as we return to school.
Yeah, that's really important. That sounds great. Um, Ross, getting back to you, what kind of supports is Geffen Academy, where you are, as the head of the wellness program? What kind of supports are you all using to help kids that may be having a little, or perhaps even more than a little difficulty adjusting? I know it's early, but I imagine there's already been some kids that have been him showing some I guess maybe difficulties with the transition.
Yeah, so one of the things we did was taking the first week of school really to readjust students to school, like just the habit, just the routine, just coming in. And so we've taken this week to have educators do presentations, to take students on retreats. And then we are doing a separate wellness session where we talk about expectations for the year. And we really do reinforce that mental health literacy of like, hey, let's hold space for everybody. Let's name what's going on. Students at Geffen Academy have a wellness class that meets once a week for their entire course at Geffen Academy from grades 6 through grades 12. So we have a chance to sit down with them, explain this, let them vent when they need to vent, but also kind of remind them that like, okay, we're all in this together. That saying like, you don't know what battle someone's fighting, so be kind to everyone. This year, we do know a lot of battles people are fighting. There are a lot of similar battles. So what can we do to express compassion? What can we do to express empathy? And then obviously for students who may fall into that 10 to 15% who have an anxiety disorder or have issues with anxiety, we have supports in place where our educators know what signs to look out for. We have systems in place of who to talk to and where to go if we do see a student who's struggling. And then, we have a good team that will create different kinds of plans depending on what the student needs. In these first couple of days, we have had students who need to take a walk around school for a moment, just as they're readjusting. We've had students who do need to see the counselor and actually like go through breathing techniques or something else as they're making that adjustment. And I think the other thing that is really important to remember is a lot of people have gone through a lot of different layers of loss in the last 18 months. They've lost family members, they've lost friends, they've lost the ability to connect in the ways that are most critical to them. And so how do we kind of slow walk that connection back? And how do we acknowledge that people are coming from different places? And again, just give space for whatever people's experiences have been and where they are in that journey.
Yeah, that's a really important point that I think people forget is the loss. I mean, so many lives have been, people have died or have suffered, and that's a really important point, and that can hit kids especially hard. How can kids and parents use these strategies at home or in other settings? Are these portable? Do the kids bring the stuff home with them and teach their parents, or work able to use these in different settings?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. Like in terms of the actual techniques you would use to manage an anxiety disorder, those are things that we come up with plans for individual students. The lessons we teach in our wellness class have been available to parents on the portal to further that communication and that dialogue. Really what you're talking about is culture change. One of the most important questions families can ask themselves is, do we have a history of mental health disorders in our family? And if you do, like educating yourself on what mental health disorders are in your family so that you can spot warning signs quicker is important. Reading books about those mental health disorders to know what to do is important. What we try to do at our school is normalize mental health for everyone of every age, educators, parents, students. And so there are a lot of times where students go home and they'll share what they learned in wellness with parents, and it kind of changes that dynamic at home. in terms of like specific actual things to do for anxiety disorders, like what I always say is what's frustrating about anxiety is it's the most common mental health disorder. It's extremely debilitating, but it is the most treatable, one of the most treatable mental health disorders too. Once you start learning new neural pathways, new coping mechanisms, they can really take hold and lessen that anxiety. So for any of you who are like interested in like, what exactly can I do? There's a lot of really great resources out there around breathing techniques, around changing behavior, around changing thoughts. And we can share more of those in the Q&A, but I think it's empowering to know, yes, anxiety is debilitating, but it is also treatable.
Yeah, that's great. So in our clinic, we do the same thing. You want to get everybody on board. We call it creating an anxiety resilient lifestyle. It's not just the kids, it's not just the parents, it's the school, it's grandparents, neighbors, coaches. If you get everybody on the same page, that's a really powerful environment for supporting kids. Great. Okay, Dr. Catalan. So you're the head of school at Geffen Academy. So you have the big picture view. The staff perspective, the student perspective, the parent perspective. You're balancing all of this. I imagine it's been a very busy few days, few weeks, few months, all year. But just from this big picture perspective, and with special, really focusing on this year, even though it's only been a couple of days, how would you say things are going so far?
Sure. Thank you, John, everyone here, friends of Semmel. Let me just start by saying with over 400 participants, I'm heartened because what it means is how much all of us care about the fact that kids, our kids, someone else's kids, our teachers, are feeling a little nervous about this year. Here's what's amazing to me. I'm kind of echoing Lucia here. Things are really good. They are really good. And I say it that way because it's also a little bit shocking. As a school administrator, it's been 16 months of always being surprised at the next thing that has to shift. And there's been, a whole bunch of adrenaline. I think what's been beautiful about this first week, and Zach, I hope next week feels this way to you, is that there's a kind of enthusiastic calm on our campus that I wouldn't have guessed going into the year. I was fully geared up for, having to exercise the muscles every single day, all day long. And I think what's amazing is that for those of us who did open last spring, and we open, and these are for, I know there are college students on listening as well. We did operate our schools, even if hybrid or at some level last spring. Now, for those of us in secondary with kids who are over 12, most of our populations are vaccinated. And there's a level of, it's not perfect, but it's really good. And so for us, it has been remarkably great. To Ross's point, there are kids who are suffering, and we are attending to our community in all of those ways. I also want to layer in that there are the kids for whom this week feels great. Everybody's going to be really tired this weekend, or Zach, in your case, the next weekend. It's Wednesday and we're like, whoa, it's only Wednesday. Wow, okay, there's a lot of human beings. But also they're the kids who 3 weeks from now, all of a sudden it's going to hit. Stress, anxiety, nervousness has a different lifetime in different bodies and in different moments. And so the past year, yes, it was about pandemic trauma, but it was also about racial reconciliation. It was about police violence, as well as, we're all quite aware of the climate situations that's going on in the state of California. There are a number of areas where our kids and adults are feeling that things are complicated and that we need to do better as a community and as a world. So, as a school, I think we're doing some good things. I think the best thing we're doing is listening and paying attention. I could go on for a really long time. The last thing I'll say in response to your question, John, and happy for follow-up questions, is, I'm also the parent of 3 children. two in college and one in high school. So as a school, we've really been focused on what we're calling getting return right. What does that mean? Paying attention to what it means. We have the great benefit of being part of UCLA, where the protocols, vaccination, testing, those are all things where we feel we can protect ourselves. However, as a school, we're also paying close attention to all the issues around adolescent identity. As our students can share, student affinity groups, parent affinity groups, really working on the wellness program that Ross has so ably grown and expanded for us. So there are many different strategies, but what I am finding this week to how it's really going is that the calm that we are feeling as administrators and educators also can be absorbed by the people around us. So that sense of deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and really being together calmly I hope it's felt in our community.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. A lot of it is expectation. If you create an expectation in an environment that's going to support calm, that can be a big step. So, in terms of creating these expectations in this calm environment, that's a lot of work, as you said, from teachers and staff. And what are you doing, or what is your school doing to support teachers and staff? Are there any things specific to this
Sure.
return?
Sure. As Ross said, we had weeks in advance of the opening of school, because for some teachers, they were here in the spring, and this goes for most schools. Some teachers, pandemic was complicated, but not traumatic. And for other folks, it's been deeply traumatic. And so giving people different options for how they come back into proximity to other humans before students came, but also clear expectations that our students and families deserve educators in the building doing the work that we do. And I think all of our, at Geffen Academy, all of our educators understand that. Again, counseling, resources, the walk around the block, permission to share, this is a moment where I need to take a quick break, and covering for each other, really being together in solidarity. It's not always easy. The schools, as I like to say, are human places, and human beings are complicated, which means schools are complicated. But we've really taken to heart the message of wellness for our students and also for our educators. Some of the things that we've done. Also, fun. Many of our educators went out on our school retreats. Seniors go tomorrow. And honestly, a focus on fun, like we can play. I think we all we weren't allowed to play in some ways for such a long time, that to get to play together in small and big ways. I'm a big fan of ping pong. Whatever your thing is, finding ways to play together it's been really lovely.
Yeah, that's great. That's really fantastic. It's not, this year just isn't just about the pandemic. I mean, that's kind of a driving force, but right, you described this. So many things happened last year with climate and politics and the racial stuff that was going on, and it affected the adults. I mean, it wasn't just our kids that were affected by that. We all were. So I really love your story of everybody has to work together, and we have to recognize that it's not just the students, the teachers and staff and parents. We're all in this together, and we all need to get through it together. And by sharing some of these strategies and some of these activities, sounds like a really great plan for doing this.
Yeah, John, and if I just might, I do want to make sure we emphasize, the phrase "we're all in this together" is difficult for some people. Some people disagree with it. I think we all know the intention behind it, but the fact that different people have experienced trauma differently, right? The murder of George Floyd has an impact in different ways depending on how you intersect with the community. And so we actually really try to make those a clear statement about that, so nobody has to feel that they don't get to say how difficult the year has been for them in whatever way they intersect with the really truly complex issues that are still here today.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's really important. So Lucia, what's your fun thing that you've been doing? Ping pong?
I do have a couple friends who run the ping pong club, which has been pretty fun.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it has been awesome, honestly, just like walking around during breaks and saying hi to people, because obviously you talk to people like that are your close friends even during the pandemic, but talking to people that I haven't really like interacted with for a long time has been really amazing. Also draining, but like really amazing. So like I found that really helpful. That's probably my most fun thing. Yeah.
So that's great. And how about you, Zach?
So I actually had a retreat for school yesterday, and it was just so nice to connect with my friends and just people I hadn't really seen um, for a couple months. So just like connecting with people is really important. I feel like connection really affects your mental health. So that was really good for me.
Oh, that's great. So Zach, what tips do you have for kids who haven't started school yet? I mean, you haven't started school yet, but what would you tell kids or your peers or your friends based on your preparations and what you're thinking, even what you're hearing this evening?
Yeah, I feel like you should really know that you're not alone and that a lot of people are feeling anxious and worried about this. And also, like I said earlier, schedule time for downtime, have like a balanced schedule, like Lucia said, and also be patient with yourself and have self-compassion as you adjust. And if you feel anxious or overwhelmed or it's hard for you to like keep up, talk to someone you trust because keeping it inside is really detrimental to your mental health. So, yeah, and also, like Dr. Catalan said, have fun.
Mhm.
That really helps too. So, those are my tips for people starting school.
Oh, those are really great. And Lucia, you said fun and connecting were really important for you. Any other tips you might have for somebody that hasn't started yet to help them approach the first day of school in maybe a little bit better shape?
Um, I think something I'd say to kids who were a little bit nervous is probably just like I'm very proud of all of us because like Zach and everybody was saying is like it's been crazy for all of us and in different ways and in different levels, but we all like did it and we are here now. And I think that's something to be really proud of. And I honestly think that thinking about that has helped me be like, okay, I know I can do this, even though it might be hard adjusting. So I think focusing on that is really helpful. And then emphasis on fun.
Mhm.
Have fun for sure.
That seems to be the common theme so far is really enjoying and having fun getting back to school. Good. So Ross, let's take a step back and talk a little bit more about some of the points that you brought up a little bit earlier here. A lot of times schools are left in position to address mental health more reactively than proactively. It's kind of forced on them in some ways. What can schools do to change this culture around mental health and anxiety on a longer term basis?
So, it's a really good question. And I think one of the things that is important is understanding that the time that schools devote to mental health and wellness is limited. It's limited by stakeholders, it's limited by schedules, it's limited by graduation requirements. One thing that we've tried to do and have done successfully at Government Academy is create an opportunity where students can learn about their wellness once a week, again, from grade 6 through grade 12. And what that allows us to do is oftentimes when we're having conversations with students about their mental health, it's jammed into 1 year or one moment, and we don't get to follow them through their adolescent milestones. So for example, you might talk about drugs or alcohol prevention in like 9th grade. And then when more students may be engaging in risk-taking behavior, no one's there to talk to them about what's going on. So whatever schools can do to create a system where it allows for check-ins with students throughout their adolescent development is really important. One thing that we have worked really hard to do is really normalize mental health. So when a lot of people hear just the words mental health, they tend to think of negative experiences, diagnoses, or things like that. We treat mental health like we treat physical health, and we teach mental health like we teach physical health. So we focus on giving a clear definition, building a vocabulary, having students understand what is good stress, what is bad stress, how to try to manage it, and really follow through on giving them skills of how they can help a friend, how they can talk about this, how they can make a difference. Is it perfect? No. We take a very strong public health approach to mental health at this school, but you still have to give space for environmental factors, biological factors, and the things that impact people. Our biggest focus is hoping that when students graduate from Geffen Academy, they are prepared for the next step they're going to take. Adjusting to college or adjusting to a gap year or whatever else they're going to do in life, we want them to have the skills, the knowledge, and the terminology to help them be successful, even if they're not applying everything. And that's why that public health approach to mental health is so important, because a therapeutic approach isn't replicable for all of these other schools. And we need to use a public health approach. I think one of the most rewarding things that I've had happen this week is our graduates, our first graduates are at college, and they were messaging me to say, hey, we've spent 4 days in orientation learning what we learned at Geffen Academy for 4 years. So while all of these other students are panicking, we're sitting here like, duh, this is life. This is what we go through. This is what we need to talk about. And obviously it's not going to be perfect for them, but that was really, like, I think the best thing we could see as a school.
Yeah, that's the distinction between mental health and physical health. Most people may not realize there really isn't one, right?
Right.
Brain and body. I mean, your mental health impacts your physical functioning. Your physical functioning impacts your mental health. It really is the same. You know, it's unfortunate that stigma around mental health really limits conversation in many ways. Now, you've done tremendous work trying to combat this stigma and reduce stigma through your own lecturing in your books about your own mental health history, more specifically with bipolar and depressive disorder. Do you use your experiences with your students?
Yeah, so one of the things we found that is really successful, and if you look at research and data on lessening stigma, one of the most effective ways to lessen stigma is contact with a person who experiences or has experienced a mental health disorder. And so we brought that into the classroom. And so when we do lessons on depression or self-hatred or anxiety or any of those things, I share my personal story responsibly. And what I mean by that is, there's a way to share your story to get other people to think about their own journey. So, you know, our students do know that I attempted to take my own life when I was in high school. And they know that when I was in high school, I was also a person with a huge external life who was a president of the class and played varsity sports and volunteered in every organization and had a perfect college resume. But on the inside, I was hiding everything. And when I share that story, we use it as a talking point in class to help them examine, like, well, are you doing that? Do you have a huge external life that people see and an internal life that you're actually hiding? And it does change the culture in a school. And I'm not the only educator at this school who shares their own experiences with mental health issues. There are educators throughout a lot of departments who do it. And what it does for students is it lets them know that this is normal, that this is okay, that this is something that they can also share. And so this past summer, we hosted the first Mental Health Teacher Training Institute at Geffen Academy at UCLA, where we started teaching other schools how adults and educators can responsibly use their personal stories in the classroom to lessen stigma, but also to normalize the concept of mental health for everyone in the school and really change that culture. And it's an institute that we're going to continue every summer. We do have a full curriculum from grade 6 through grade 12, which we'll be offering as well, because the mental health epidemic in our country is only going to change if we change the education system to start teaching about mental health the same way we teach about physical health.
Yeah, that's so important, and what a great program that you've developed there. Dr. Catalan, it's only been a few days, a couple days, I think 3 maybe, since school started. And we've talked a lot about the students' responses, the teachers' responses, a little bit about the parents. But what's your sense so far about the parent experience? How have parents been experiencing the return? And I imagine you've talked to probably quite a few parents, some anxious, maybe some very excited about the return of school. But is there anything you can sum up?
Sure. Maybe this will connect with some of the folks out there. Of course, for many of us, it is an incredible relief to see our kids go to school, know that they have the connections that Zach and Lucia have talked about, know that they have routines, know that there are teachers and other grown-ups who are helping them on their, steps through adolescence. I will say for some parents, when something goes sideways or something is difficult or there's always a moment when you don't get the class you want, or you don't get the team you want, or the club that you wanted is full. I would share that I think it's really hard for parents right now to see a kid not get something that they want for them, and harder than usual. Look, it's always hard because we want everything for our kids. That's our job. I always tell parents at Geffen Academy, like, I respect the advocacy. That's literally what we're supposed to do. Kids need people, right, who are fighting for them. But I would say there's a new layer to that this year, because we have felt that our children have missed out or been denied or really been stoic and trying to get through. And we really just want them to get what they want. And we worry that some way we're implicated that they haven't gotten things that they've wanted. And so there is a level of, please see, let my kid have what they want to have, right? And of course, schools are institutions, and there are all the COVID protocols where there's some more constraints around what a school can and can't do. I'll just share what I'm trying to bring. Past spring, all the buildup of all the things, I was probably a little tired. I did take a little bit of fun, a few days of rest, and coming into this fall, really have been focusing on what sort of the trauma-informed pedagogy looks like for all of us. And so meeting the frustrations of parents or students or educators with a couple, maybe this is helpful to people out there, but really noticing how hard everybody is trying and honoring that. Like, it might not come out perfectly expressed, right? But like Zach, Lucia, all of the parents that are out there, like, we are all trying really hard to do our best, and really saying that out loud to people, especially to the kid who might be struggling with real deep-seated or light anxiety. Like, I see how hard you're trying to be here, and that it's hard for you. And I'm sorry that it's hard, and I'm still here for you, even though it's hard. The other sort of strategies, John, there are 4 words that I have trying to hold with me as we go into the school year. One is, and this is from the trauma research, one is how comforting predictability is. We've all dealt with, I couldn't have told you last year what was coming the next week. It's like, we're doing great today, but I don't know what's happening at noon. So I'll get back to you when noon hits and I have to tell you something different. So really creating a predictable schedule and experience, but mirroring that, partnering that with flexibility. Each person coming back, as I said, is coming back with a different set of experiences, and making sure that you look at the person and ask them, what's going on? Why is this thing not working for you? 2 other things, connection, we've all talked about, really make our educators are really like, I see you, trying to do that. And I'm trying to do that with my colleagues as well. I think one interesting is this sense of control, or, and I was on a panel earlier with some other folks, and really that sense of like being empowered, having choices over our lives. Lucia, you said controlling the things that you can actually control. Layer on that something that I talk about, which is, yes, having choice to do things, but actually centering yourself around a kind of purpose. What is it that you want to get done? Why does that thing matter to you? I love to read, and so I also spent time reading. Hold on, I got to find the name of the book. David Brooks's latest book called The Second Mountain. I'm reading another book called The Path to Purpose. Really finding out what is that thing that matters to you and how are you going to do something about it, and that then gives you an anchor for moving through things that feel unpredictable, unconnected, rigid. So John, those are some of the things that I've been thinking about, and then of course fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like those 4 words, and I'm going to look for that book, David Brooks. It sounds very good. Good. So we just have a few minutes left, and I have a couple of final questions, and these are going to be for our students. So Zach, what advice do you have for teachers right now? How can teachers be most helpful to their students based on your experience? And again, you're not back in school yet, but I think you probably have a reasonable idea.
Yeah, so I think teachers should really pay attention to whether their students are distracted or overwhelmed and really check in with them to see how they're doing. Also, not to expect too much too soon. And then for parents, I feel like their anxiety about their kids' anxiety will just make their kids stressed out. So instead of worrying so much about what their kids are experiencing, they should just check in with them in a calm way, not ask them a ton of times how they're doing.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. As parents, we think we can hide our anxiety from our kids, but nope, doesn't work, right? It's very hard to hide anxiety, and kids pick it up really well, and it usually makes them more anxious. So those are really great words there. And Lucia, the same questions for you. What do you think teachers can do to help students, and what advice do you have for parents?
I think for teachers, it's something that Mr. Zabo was talking about at Geffen, but for me, something I found really helpful these past couple of days is just the vulnerability piece. Like, just we're all human, and I find that really helpful to connect with my teachers in that way. Like, I acknowledge they are people and like they have their own stressors going on, and then so do I. And just like having that connection, like on a human level, makes it way more easier and like comfortable and like safer space to talk. And to just like, be able to express whenever I'm having a hard time. And then advice for parents, on the first day that I came home, I came and I told my mom, and I was like, I'm so exhausted. I don't even know if I can tell you about my day, which I then proceeded to tell her about my day, of course. But for me, I felt like it was really nice to know that like either way, she was either going to listen to me or like leave me space to like rest, So I feel like that's really helpful to have just the space for what you need. Just like a good listener.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, I think we are out of time, but if I can just say, Ross, I think this was your idea to put this panel together. And man, I am so glad you did. I love meeting all of you, especially Lucia and Zach. And I learned a lot today, and I hope our audience did too. So thank you all.
Thank you, guys. That was wonderful. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable and sharing your experiences. I know that our viewers have a lot of questions and would like to pick your brains. So I'm going to pass along some of those questions now. Our first one is from Inanna. What would you recommend to a parent of a teen who's resistant to try anything to help with her nervousness? She doesn't believe deep breathing or meditation work, but she can't eat in the morning and she's having dry heaving before school. Any recommendations for the parent?
Right. So, one of the hardest things about when teens have a mental health disorder is oftentimes we focus so much on treatment and diagnosis that we forget that there are actual barriers to why they may not want to accept help. When you ask teens about that, a lot of times they feel embarrassed, ashamed, weak, stupid, weird, don't feel like they have someone they can trust, feel like they should just be able to suck it up and deal with it on their own, or they're afraid of burdening other people. So one step in this is finding out what are the largest kind of barriers preventing them from accepting that help or following through on that, and really trying to reassure them to break down those barriers, to let them know that it takes more strength to talk about this than it does to hide it. It can help to compare mental health to physical health Like most people wouldn't walk around with a broken leg and not be participating in trying to get that help. But really, with anxiety, what it comes down to is a lot of times teens think like, I'm at point A, I need to get to point B, I need this figured out, and brains don't work like that. So really celebrating any small successes along the way is a critical part of that recovery. So even if that person with the anxiety disorder who is so resistant isn't as resistant on certain days, really trying to help guide them and support them so that neural pathway starts building in a new way that's beneficial to them. But this question is truly one of the most defeating, frustrating, horrifying things for a parent to go through, because you just don't want your kid to be in pain, and now you see it and you can't fix it. So talking to a professional, coming up with a plan is extremely critical.
One quick addition, AJ, if I might, and I'll borrow a sports coaching metaphor, off the ball coaching. So if you can take a moment where it's not in the morning before leaving school, maybe it's a walk around the block and you're not raising the issue directly. Think also, and this isn't to infantilize adolescents, but it is a fact, think parallel play. Doing something side by side, and even being available in the late night hours side by side, doing dishes. Things can come out when it's not eyeball to eyeball that might not come out when asked directly.
Love that. Awesome. Okay. Now the next question is from Tamra. Are there resources for educators who don't have a mental health curriculum, for example, in public schools?
Yes, so we had a bunch of public schools come to the Mental Health Teacher Training Institute this summer, and we have it available. The easiest way is to kind of contact me, and I can follow up with them. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Awesome. Tamara also wants you, Ross, to go speak at the school in Santa Monica if you're available. Our next question is from Masood. What are some signs we should look for in someone around us who might be suffering from an anxiety disorder? And what would you recommend the first step in helping them?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that too. So the signs of what people look like when they're having an anxiety disorder are very different depending on the person. So like the easiest sign to spot is a panic attack, when someone, can't breathe or is sweating or is crying or is feeling like they're just having a really strong reaction to any kind of trigger. And there's all kinds of triggers for anxiety disorders: social situations, meeting new people, phobias, all those kinds of things. The more subtle and difficult anxiety disorder symptoms to spot are when someone just feels really uncomfortable and they're introverted and they hide it. So they kind of avoid situations or stop doing things they used to do or stop engaging in ways that they used to engage. And in those cases, it's a lot harder because you have to ask questions about like, well, how are you feeling? Why did you stop doing this? You used to do these things. What's going on? So when your kid isn't having the blatant, like obvious panic attacks, it's really important to pay attention to what are they avoiding? Is it different from what they typically did? I try to stay away from the word normal because like, what's the baseline for normal? So just paying attention to, are they changing their behavior from things they typically did? Are they shutting down? Are they avoiding things? And that could be you as a family member, it could be school, it could be something they enjoyed, but really trying to pay attention to the more subtle signs of what are they now, what is their behavior now and what are they staying away from?
And one of the things that you can,
as well.
Yeah, that's great. I agree exactly with Ross. The problem with, not the problem, but kids with anxiety, they're the ones that really don't get in trouble. It's the kids that are making all the noise are the ones that draw the attention. But if you think your child has really withdrawn like that, or is exhibiting some of these signs, the first thing is to try to talk to them and find out what's going on, doing it in a supportive way. And if it looks like there are problems, if these are taking place at school, you can talk to school. You can talk to the teachers or principal, and they can certainly connect you with mental health. Or if pediatricians are a great way to get, some information, or you can reach out. There are a number of programs. Our clinic at UCLA, there's a lot of information on the web. If I can say, we have a website. We through the Care Center, carecenter.ucla.edu. It's Care Center is one word. We have a lot of information for parents and teachers on how to recognize anxiety, some of the strategies that you all were talking about, the panel in terms of different kinds of exercises or links to treatment. So there's a lot of good treatments out there. As Ross said, I think maybe Dr. Catalan as well. It's a very treatable disorder.
And Dr. Catalan, I just would like to ask you, for what would you recommend for teachers who maybe it's not the parents who are noticing? What should a teacher do, not sort of overstep their bounds, but if they're noticing some signs of what could be the beginning of a mental health disorder or an anxiety disorder, what should their first step be?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the school context. Let me say that out loud. But there's some don't do's, of course. We never call out a kid in a public way. We don't shame. We don't say out loud, I wonder if you're, none of that. So let me just clear that to the side. Hallway conversations, if you are skilled in hallway conversations, can be really helpful. Hey, I noticed today you seem a little low energy. I just wanted to check in on you. Light entry. But for more serious matters, or if it is a teacher who is uncomfortable with and isn't skilled in those conversations, then the best step is to talk to whoever the professional is on the team, and that professional will know how to find a moment that is not invasive to connect with that kid. So a couple different things on that front.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And this one I'd like to direct toward Lucia and Zach. This one is from Chanel. How do you deal with anxiety while in school? Because that can be a little bit different than going home and dealing with homework. But while you're in school, what are some coping mechanisms you use?
I can talk. For me, I find it very helpful. This isn't the case for everybody, I know that for sure, but I find it really helpful to have adults that I can speak to, like Zabo, just like to check in. Sometimes it's really nice to just take that moment to yourself. Just sitting alone in a corner, sometimes that can help, or maybe just chatting with a friend. I just find it really helpful, like let people know like what's going on sometimes too, because at least at my school, I'm lucky that my teachers will give me that space. Yeah, that's most helpful for me.
Yeah, and for me, I found that like a balance is really helpful between like things you like to do for fun, and then like your schoolwork and that anxiety. And I feel like doing things you like to do will definitely help with that. And also, talking to people if you have those resources. Like for you, Lucia, you mentioned that at your school, you have that, which is really great. So if having like some adult you could talk to is really helpful in having that balance.
Can I also just put in a plug for a good snack and a glass of water? Water actually has oxygen in it, so it is a way to remind yourself to get the oxygen that can actually help you settle. Sorry, I have to put in a plug for the snack.
I love that. I mean, snacking is always the answer. That's first of all. This one is from Kurapi. If after spending freshman year of high school online, do you have any recommendations for adapting to sophomore year in person? That's kind of a rough transition because it's kind of like freshman year all over again. It's the first high school experience in person. Any advice?
Yeah, so I'm going into my sophomore year, and last year was all on Zoom. So the last time I was really in school was in eighth grade. So I'm in like the same boat as you in terms of that. And for us, I mean, I feel like we're gonna act more like ninth graders, like freshmen for the beginning of the year. And honestly, you're not alone in that. I mean, we all missed out on that social interaction. So don't worry about that. It I'm in the same boat as you.
All right. And this one's for me. Because freshman year and also college freshman year is such a huge lifestyle change. Are there any signs that educators or students themselves should be looking for in being triggered by those lifestyle changes? For me personally, freshman year of college triggered my first major depressive cycle, dealing with my bipolar disorder. So what signs can students look for and the people around them?
Well, that's a good question. It's, again, I think in terms of difficulties adjusting, and especially with more severe issues, psychological issues or psychiatric issues. I mean, it's not too dissimilar from what Ross described. A lot of it is either withdrawal, avoiding everything, or sometimes it's engaging in excess. Trying to find an equilibrium, trying to adjust. So going overboard with certain things, and whatever that might be, or avoidance. Pretty much anything, or if you're diverting from kind of the midline to some extent. Now, all kids when they go to college, or a lot of kids when they go to college, it's freedom. It's for the first time, and it does take some adjustment. There are it's kind of up and down until you get your equilibrium. But typically, if the adjustment is difficult, and most kids make it through that. I know I did, my friends, but not all of us did. And the kids that had the harder time, the ups were much more extreme and the downs were much more down. And a lot of that was just unable to find that center, to find that experience because of, for whatever reasons. And that, oftentimes it's difficult for kids needing to stop, go out of school or get treatment or something like that. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I think that is all the time that we have. That's a good note to end on. I want to thank all of our participants today. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I've gotten the clearance to ask one more question. We've got a question about bullying. How do you guys, and Lucia and Zach, but also parents, deal with guiding children through bullying?
And I'll just jump in here for a quick second, because I would make the case that schools have to take an extremely active hand in bullying, that any school needs to have investigatory processes that allows them to hear from the folks involved. It's a very complicated, and one of the best investments is to make sure you hire a team of people who really understand how to ask important questions around this. But I completely understand how the leap from bullying to back to school anxiety exists, because if you are a child who hasn't found supportive relationships, school can often be a really difficult, painful place. So in terms of talking to kids about bullying, the one thing before I turn it over to other people that I want parents and students to hear me say is that there is some notion that speaking up about someone who's hurting other people or yourself is a form of snitching. The best thing we could all do is to move away from that idea and understand that it's advocacy for people being well treated. I'll leave it there. There's so much to talk about on this front, and learning how to speak up for yourself is one of those empowerment pieces, and will go a long way, but you need the support of adults, because there's all kinds of mechanisms where kids find ways to hurt other kids. And sometimes they just need to be very clearly told, you may not do that anymore.
That's beautiful. I love that. Perfect answer. All right, guys, thank you so much for this. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you to all of our participants today. Thank you, everybody at home, for joining. I hope you'll come back for future Open Mind programs. Our next will be on September 9th with Dr. Uma Naidu, author of This Is Your Brain on Food, and Dr. Xiaoping Li, chief of the Division of Clinical Nutrition at UCLA. They'll be discussing how food contributes to our mental health. It sounds fascinating. I will be there. I hope you will too. We'll see you soon. Good night, everybody.